When I first got into the field of executive coaching, I thought it was going to be all about psychology. But then I found that it was actually more about sociology and philosophy. You know, the people I work with have to make decisions at a time when big changes are taking place in the values of society. And that's creating a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos. And it's going to get worse for your generation. So we need a new philosophy for living in the 21st century. But before we speak about the philosophy, I'd like to speak a little bit about the psychology involved. You know, what gets in the way of making good decisions? And to illustrate the answer to that, I'd like you to first think of a picture. Imagine there's a tiger and it's chasing a goat in a jungle, right? And for a short period of time, things are very exciting for the tiger and sure as hell for the goat, but imagine if the goat gets away. Very quickly after that, what's going to happen is the goat is going to start to relax, right? It's almost like the event never even happened. But now let's look at a slightly different situation where we put the goat in the same cage as the tiger. And the tiger is chained up, so the goat is just out of its reach, but now the goat can't relax at all. You know, and it starts getting so stressed that it will literally get stress hormones to the point that it's actually ill, even though there's no real danger. And that's what's happening to humans, that we've lost the ability to switch off our survival instincts, even when there's no real danger. And the reason that's happened is because there are effectively two types of animals in the history of our planet. There have been those animals which are chilled out and relaxed, and they're all dead, right? And there have been those animals that are hypersensitive and they jump at the first sign of danger, real or imagined, right? And, sorry, just checking the mic. And those animals that were hypersensitive have survived. Now, what that means is only the paranoid survive. And since we've been one of the species that have survived, we're going to be paranoid. Now, there are 4 survival instincts. It used to be very useful to us in the past, but they're not so helpful in decision making now, right? The fear of not being respected, the fear of not being liked, the fear of uncertainty, and the dislike of effort. So let's look at the fear of not being respected first. You know, in the good old caveman days, when some big animal is coming towards you, and it doesn't look scared at all, right? Bad things are going to happen to you. Either it's going to take your mate, or it's going to eat your food, or it's going to eat you, right? So we have a deeply wired need to be respected. And quite often when I do coaching sessions with married couples, I've even heard some men justify why they beat their wives, saying she wasn't respecting me. This is obviously an extreme case, but this need to be respected at all costs drives aggression and competition, and that creates bad decisions. Similarly, this fear of not being liked is deeply wired into us. In caveman days, if we weren't part of a herd, if we weren't part of a pack, our chances of survival would go down. And so we really crave external validation. The place where I really see this is when I work with first generation working mothers. They put so much pressure on themselves to be perfect because they've got no benchmark to compare themselves against. And so they're constantly trying to please husband, boss, kids, and they wear themselves out with worry. You know, so this is another barrier that gets in the way of our happiness. The fear of uncertainty is another fear that gets in the way of good decision making. In the old days, we would never go into a jungle which we didn't know before because we don't know what animals are dangerous, which plants are poisonous. And even today, this fear of uncertainty can paralyze us in different directions. You know, quite often I work with senior managers who have been made redundant from their jobs, or young MBAs who haven't been placed at the end of the placement season. And this fear of uncertainty, what is going to happen to me, is sometimes so powerful that they actually become so nervous they can't actually do their interviews properly, right? And it's an overreaction because, you know, if you don't get this job, you're going to get another one 3 months or 6 months. You're not going to end up as a starving beggar. But because of the overreaction, it's actually counterproductive. And the final barrier to effectiveness is the dislike of effort. Now, laziness has evolved for very good reasons. So in defense of laziness, you will never see a lion playing football or frisbee because they know if they expend too much energy, they might run out and they could starve and die. But of course, we don't have that sort of problems as humans today. We don't need to be so lazy, but it's into our body, right? Now, these are instincts that are wired into our body. We're born with them. And by themselves, we would find ways of overcoming them. But what makes it even harder is when we made the transition from caveman era to early civilization, we took these animal instincts and we codified them and embedded them into our cultural norms and systems, right? There are four cultural systems that we have. The myth of success, myth of goodness, myth of certainty, and the myth of entitlement, right? So the myth of success, let's look at that first. The myth of success says, if I'm rich, if I'm successful, then everybody will respect me and I don't need to be scared of anybody. It has evolved to address our fear of not being respected. The problem is there's a very small link between actual material success and happiness. And quite often I find when I coach CEOs, they're more stressed than middle-level managers because this constant drive to stay ahead of the competition, it becomes exhausting after a while. Myth of success doesn't mean you're going to be happy if you're successful. The myth of goodness says basically that if I'm a nice guy, if I'm nice to everybody, everybody will love me, and if everybody loves me, I'll be happy. And this is a myth because you cannot make everybody happy. You know, if you just say this is who I voted for in the last elections, you're going to annoy half the people in your office, right? And about 50% of the married men that I work with, middle-aged married men, they find themselves struggling to balance between their mothers and their wives because they're trying to be the peacemaker, be the nice guy, and they're contributing to the confusion that's there instead of just saying, hey, listen, you know what, I love you both, but I'm not willing to sort this out, right? If you like each other, that's great. If you don't, that's fine. But I'm not going to be the referee. You guys sort it out. But instead of doing that, they put themselves and they try to mediate and be the nice guy. They get pulled in different directions. And when they become martyrs to this, nobody ends up being happy, you know? The myth of certainty is basically the belief that if I don't take any risks, if I play safe, then there's nothing to worry about and I'll be happy. But the problem is we're also going to be bored out of our minds. You see, if I raise my finger up and down, I don't get any happiness from this because I know 100% for sure I can do this. But if I shoot a three-pointer and a basketball on the buzzer and win the game, I get happiness from that precisely because there was uncertainty involved. So you can't live lives of meaning and uncertainty and adventure and excitement without uncertainty. And in fact, if you have too much certainty, it becomes stale and actually paradoxically very stressful because you're constantly worried about all the things you can't control, right? And we really need to learn as a society how to handle uncertainty because we're creating generations of young engineers like yourself. Instead of going companies to make robots, they're becoming robots. We are frittering away our creative energy in our fear of uncertainty. Now, the next one is the myth of entitlement. And this is something that advertisers sell to us to exploit our fear of, our dislike of effort. You know, you'll see a lot of these advertisements where the guy goes and gets a ring from a diamond jeweler branded shop, and just suddenly his marriage becomes perfect. So people think that life is going to be really easy. Now, it's not. You know, I work with a lot of first-year marriage couples, and they're struggling because they didn't realize it was going to be so hard. When I speak to them, they say things like, "It shouldn't be this hard." And I'm like, who told you that? You know, who told you that it shouldn't be this hard? You need to put in effort. And what's happening as a result is, in my experience, the number of divorces are also rising very dramatically in India. You know, part of it is financial independence for women and less stigma and so on. But part of it is this myth of entitlement. Now, what makes it even worse is these myths, societal myths, and our innate instincts sometimes pull us in different directions. So we want to be a successful entrepreneur, but our fear of uncertainty makes us not want to leave our job. We want to be popular and liked, but our dislike of effort says, oh man, you know, going to that party is going to be such a lot of effort. So we're pulled in different directions and we get torn, and we need a roadmap, right? Now, many people have tried to create infallible roadmaps before. The 10 Commandments, the Quran, the Manusmriti, Mao's Little Red Book, even the Indian Constitution. These are all roadmaps, and all of them have failed at some level in terms of practical implementation. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is, why is it so difficult to create a workable roadmap for reality, some guidelines we can use? And the reason for that is because words are limited and finite. And reality is alive, dynamic, and infinitely complex. So words just aren't powerful enough to capture reality, let alone master it. Let me give you an example. So supposing I'm coaching a manager on delegation skills, and he says something in the course of the conversation, something like, oh, you can't trust anybody. And I say, okay, well, let's explore that belief. You know, let's look at that more deeply. Well, you can't trust anyone is not right. So it's okay, you can trust some people, and maybe there's some people you can't trust. But even that's not accurate, because maybe there's some people who you can trust in most occasions, but in some occasions you can't. And there are other people who you generally can't trust, but sometimes maybe you can. But even that's not accurate, because it doesn't take into account how we're interacting with them, how clear our expectations are on them, what pressures are on them. And in fact, if you include all these factors, the sentence becomes more and more big. As you make this guidance universal and comprehensive and accurate, the statement becomes more and more generic and vague, until the point comes when the manager's like, okay, well, what do I do? Do I trust them or not? Every clear guidance statement you will ever hear in your life will be incomplete and inconsistent, right? Because words can't capture reality. And the great traditions of the past have understood this. They've understood that there are some universal but inexpressible laws that we are trying to reach towards with our laws and our texts and our religious books and stuff. In ancient India, it was called the dharma, the law of dharma. In ancient China, it was called the Tao. In ancient Greece, it was called logos, inexpressible laws that we're trying to reach, but we can't quite grasp. And I like this saying from Zen. It says that when somebody points a finger at the moon, look at the moon, not at the finger. And what it's really saying to us is we can point towards reality with our guidance, but we can't pin it down. We can't write it down in words. And that's why it's so difficult to create order from the chaos. But I do believe that we are on the verge, as a species, of the human race, of getting much closer to understanding these universal, inexpressible laws, if indeed they exist, And now we don't want to throw away the societal myths completely, because there must be some value in them, otherwise we wouldn't have kept them so long. So we've got to evaluate which parts work and which parts don't. So the myth of success, it really says that if you're rich, you'll be happy, right? And there's some truth to this. Because if you have a minimum level of material comfort, you have more choices available. You don't have to worry about where the next meal is coming from. And, you do need goals. If you don't have goals, you become like a cow. You're just eating and sleeping and pooping, right? So goals and some ambition give you something to do. It creates excitement in your life, excitement and adventure. But the real insight that your generation is going to explore far more than any previous generation is that it's only you who has the authority to set your own goals. It's only you who can define what is success, right? And so far, a lot of us have been doing what we've been doing because of external statements of what success is. Think of why you chose your course, why you chose the stream you took, which company you first want to join. A lot of these decisions are being influenced by what will people think. And you guys are increasingly going to make autonomous decisions, right? And that's going to bring you into conflict with the value system, because your definition of success may not match society's definition of success, and you will want both, and that's going to pull you in different directions. The myth of goodness. The myth of goodness says if you do what society wants from you, if you do those behaviors that society thinks are good, you're a good person. And if you don't, then you're a bad person. Now, the insight that your generation, again, is going to explore much more than any previous generation is that good or bad is not about societal arbitrary things like what I wear, my sexual orientation, the language I speak, none of that. It's about, do I harm other people or not? And so you're increasingly going to create win-win relationships where I get what I want and you get what you want, and we don't have to sacrifice our individual drives and preferences in order to make deep, meaningful relationships. And so increasingly what's happening is I'm finding young couples are coming to me after workshops and they're talking about the tension in their family because they have found somebody from a different religion or caste who they can express their individuality with and they want to spend their lives with, but that's going to clash against the existing value system. What is good, what is right, what is wrong. A lot of people are feeling guilty simply for wanting to marry somebody that they actually like. This is another clash that's coming. The myth of certainty says that if you avoid risk, you'll be happy. And what we're realizing is if you avoid risk, you will be bored out of your minds. And if you think about some of these big companies that are such a part of our lives nowadays, Facebook is only 10 years old. Google is only 15 years old. So some of the industries that you guys are going to be in 5 years, 10 years from now, they haven't even been conceptually thought of today. And so all the certainty you're looking for is gone. Far more important than what you've learned is the ability to learn. So your generation is going to be looking for the underlying principles that can handle uncertainty rather than trying to avoid uncertainty. And you're going to be in a really bad position, because I'll tell you what, the previous generation did not like uncertainty, and so they did not take risks. The next generations are going to be friends with uncertainty, and they're going to enjoy adventure, and you guys are in the middle where you're going to, you're going to take risks, and you're going to be petrified all the time because you're in the middle. You're part of that transition. The myth of entitlement says that life should be easy. Life is hard and it should be easy. And your generation is going to say, I don't mind working hard because I'm chasing my goals rather than other people's goals. But the insight that you guys are going to develop in your journey is you're going to be the first generation that does not link its self-esteem to the number of hours you guys are working. That's a value system from the old generation. I get a lot of senior managers coming to me and they're upset because they didn't get promoted, and they say, it's not fair because I work so hard. But you see, every single laborer on a building site works harder than Bill Gates. You're not rewarded for efforts, you're rewarded for results. And that requires imagination and clarity and creativity. And so you're the first generation that is not going to measure yourself by how many hours I'm spending in the office. You're going to use your experience of life to measure how I'm doing. How much am I actually enjoying what I'm actually doing? Again, that's going to be hard for you, because you're going to have to break the program system which tells you to value hard work for the sake of hard work. Now, these are some big changes that your generation are going to usher into how you see the world, and there's going to be a lot of confusion. So in order to simplify it a little, I'm going to give you 4 questions. And these are 4 questions that I ask my coaches at the beginning of our coaching relationship, and I believe if you answer these 4 questions, it'll really help you. Yeah. The first question relates to goals, and the question is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Right? And this is one of the hardest questions that people have to answer. They don't even know how to answer it because they've been so taught this is what you should want that they can't even answer this. And when I ask this question, sometimes they'll say completely unrealistic things like, oh, I'd be an astronaut. Or they'll say completely mundane things like, I'd like to learn French. But if you really answer this question, you've created the possibility of a great life, because the hardest part of creating a great life is actually envisioning what it looks like. If you can do that with granularity, after that it's actually not that hard in my experience. It's pretty easy. The second question I'd have you think about is, what are your principles? Your principles are the behavioral strategies that if I do this consistently over a long period of time, I think I will reach my goals, right? And each principle has some short-term price you need to be paying. So honesty is the best policy, for example. There are short-term prices. A lot of time people come to me in coaching conversations with a problem, and of course I can never give them the solution or say this is what you should do, but what I ask them is, what are the principles on the basis of which you will make this decision? And what I found is I've never had a situation where people clarify, okay, these are the principles on which I'm going to make my decision. After they've done that, they never find the actual decision they were struggling with hard anymore. So this is a very important question. The next question is with respect to relationships. If you had 1 hour left to live, who would you call and what would you say, and why are you waiting? In our drive for external validation and success, the first thing I've noticed that happens once people start their corporate careers is that relationships get back on the back burner. The people they care about most, they take most for granted. Now, I've had workshops where literally 20 out of 20 people have started crying when I ask them, is the amount of time and the level of engagement that you spend with the ones you care about most, does that match what you actually say you care for them? And it's a bit of a shock, because this is the first one that goes. And this question has you think about who and what is really important to you. And the final question is one that almost holds the key to all these other questions. Who is the ultimate consumer of your life? And intellectually you may know the answer to that. It's obviously me. But experientially, that's not how we're living it. Quite often people live it as if the ultimate consumer of our life is society or parents or our company. And when they really get it's about me, this is one big insight that your generation is going to explore far more than any previous generation. And that insight is, it's not people who martyr themselves or who sacrifice their happiness who make other people happy. Happy people make other people happy. But as you chase your bliss, as you chase what really you're passionate about, you're going to have to struggle with the programming that people who focus on what they really care about are selfish and irresponsible. That's something that you're going to need to overcome. in your generation? Now, these questions are not easy questions. But there is a change coming, and as the present crashes into the future, there's going to be chaos and confusion. I believe if you answer these questions for yourselves, you'll be able to create happiness and meaning and excitement and adventure and peace of mind for all the people you care about, and also for yourselves. Thank you very much.